Welcome back to the show, where we talk about the emerging voices in architecture and designers who are building meaningful careers one step at a time. Today's guest, Aryaman Garg, has quietly built a path that many young architects dream of, but very few actually hear the full story behind it. From SPA Delhi, he took initiative early, interning at Stilt Studio in Bali, then moving on to work with Alexis Dornier during the lockdown phase. And in his fourth year, he landed a dream internship at Bjarke Ingels Group, New York office, which eventually has led him to secure his current full-time role at the Big London. His story isn't just about shortcuts or big breakthroughs, it's about staying curious, showing up, and learning through every phase. Ariman, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kavil. That was a really nice introduction, and I feel honored to be here. With working with Novatr, which has been, the industry leads in bridging the gap between education and what the architecture AEC industry requires. So it's very interesting to be here, and I'm looking forward to the whole thing.
Great. It's good to know, Arman, and I'm quite excited for this. And I think your journey and your story would help a lot of people to understand what it takes to start off from, every other regular college peers that you would have, and then being at very aspirational practice like Bjarke Ingels Group is something that would give a lot of insights to people of your through your journey of how one can reach there and also aspire to dream big to be at big. Great. All right, so let me begin. Let's rewind to your time at SPA Delhi. It's one of India's top architecture school, but every student experiences it differently, right? And with that, I have a question with you, which is what kind of student were you at SPA? Were you always clear about your path, or did it evolve over time? I'm sure a lot of people would have this question to understand for those who are in success, has attained success in their career. Did they ever start at special or something different? Or was it all
Yeah.
the same?
So my journey actually began, before going to SPA. So I was in a boarding school in Dehradun called Wellham Boys School, and the whole atmosphere of that, institution was very, like routine driven. We were, into sports, academics, so it was a very motivated atmosphere there. People were excelling and stuff. To be honest, I wanted to be a football player, like full-fledged, full-time football player. But I think, by the time you grow up enough, you realize, that's a little tricky, like betting on being a football player as a professional career, especially the location, India, and all of that stuff really matters. So, yeah, I remember I was in my 10th grade and I realized that, I'm good in maths, I like physics, and I'm fairly creative. I wasn't an artist, I didn't have like, good paintings and stuff, but I knew I was creative. So I made an informed decision of pursuing architecture. And at that time, I had no precedence, like there was no architect in my family. No one in my, Vellum in boarding school was pursuing architecture. So I had no idea what this was, but I knew I wanted to be an architect. But yeah, then in 11th and 12th, I was studying for JE. And so JE had two sets of papers, right? One
Mhm.
is the engineering part, in which, you're focusing on getting into a BTech college. And the second part is architecture. So, and maths is common between them. I was preparing for JE, and also at the same time, I was preparing for the architecture entrance exam because they had, like similarity. The architecture papers was quite, it was the format of the paper was very intriguing for me to see that there were pattern recognition, spatial analysis, and all of these interesting questions. So I was just preparing for that, not and at the same time preparing for JE. And I remember, I gave the paper as a trial attempt in January, and I was surprised I got in SPA Delhi, which is the most premium institute of architecture in India right now. So I was quite happy about it. But it was an informed decision, but I never knew what the field is about. So before even entering college, I was escaping a 9 to 6 computer job,
Hmm.
at a BTech, typical corporate office. Literally, I wanted just to be, like something which is not on a desk. But,
Mhm.
funny enough, now it's not 9 to 6, it's 9 to 9. I mean, that's how it goes in the industry, right?
As long as you're
So,
having fun, I think it doesn't matter 9 to 9 or 9
yeah,
to 2.
for sure, for sure. Like it's always it's the demand, but yeah, that's another topic. I was so my point is that like my idea of architecture was very different than what was being taught in colleges like SPA, and then what is happening in the field is that's a different aspect, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I was always very creative, and SPA was a like a very different world for me, to be honest, because in SPA, Kamal, I think you can back me up on this. SPA has this like huge talented bunch of motivated individuals, and which creates an environment like everyone's striving for something. And I was with this very curious kid, meeting people from all across India. I was just running here and there, talking to people, and I remember learning a lot from so many seniors in SP at that time. Harcover was there. He was starting Novatr at that time. It was called 1:2X back then. And I met Anurag Saini. He's running his BIM firm in Texas right now. So a lot of motivated individuals along the way. And yeah, I think that's an environment like that is the true value of SPA, this kind of culture which pushes you forward along with the flow. So I think that's something that really stands out. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, yeah, it all sums up probably even if you, like you said, that even if you don't
Hmm.
have the idea of how the journey is going to be, but the moment you stepped into an environment where you could meet people who had an idea more than you, and in the environment which was thriving into, helping you utilize your creativity and push your boundaries, I think that becomes a good motivator or a catalyst to
Yeah.
pursue wherever the direction takes you. And even if you're not clear at your path from the very beginning of where
Yeah,
you
like.
should lead. Yeah, great. You talked about, academics, college, and the
Hmm.
environment that there is. And along with that, it does add to how you've been carved into what you currently are, right?
Hmm.
And I just have another question with regards to it that just follows to me, which is, were
Hmm.
there any small habits, moments, or mentors that helped you sharpen your, focus during college to be really skilled at what you currently are doing and which has led you to where you are currently?
I mean, now that I think about it, as I mentioned, talking to people was something which really, really gave me perspective about architecture.
Hmm.
Like it was very early on, I realized there's a huge gap. I remember I was talking to Anurag Sini, and I was helping him during his thesis and everything. And he just gave me, it was a very casual conversation, but it was sort of a presentation. He likes to sketch and everything. So he was telling me there's a 10-year gap in what is happening in architecture in India in the industry. So imagine the education sector is even it's a 15-year gap, but 10-year gap between what is happening in the industry abroad and what is happening in India. And he had some sort of international experience at that point. And
Hmm.
at that time, I think it was I decided that it is imperative for me to learn what is happening in the industry right now, and that is only through work experience. And there's another thing I think which is not valued today in today's time is being consistent.
Hmm.
I remember everybody wanted to learn softwares, and everybody was like where to start, what is it about, and everything. And at that time we didn't have companies like Novator in existence, right? So
Hmm.
it was just YouTube. So I made this habit of just spending 1 hour each day just learning a software, just following a
Hmm.
tutorial, learning what is happening 1 hour each day. And I think, Kawal, I can make sure like in a month I was proficient enough in Rhino to model complex geometries. In Grasshopper, I was able to like make scripts of attractive facades, like some distance based algorithms. So all of that was quite possible in just a month's time, an hour each day. I mean, that's nothing. compared to how much we think about it, procrastinate about it instead of
Mm.
acting.
Interesting. Well, I think you've summed it up very nicely. I think it's really reassuring for many of the people who would be watching it, where, especially for students who feel like they're still figuring out and may not have an idea, as you said, that you started off where your interest lies, maths, physics, creativity. You got
Mhm.
into a college, thankfully, to what the effort you put in, and then meeting people, understanding with them where the journey takes, and understanding where the industry is heading. All those sums up together, which you may or may not have an idea very initially, but eventually over the time, your path is carved, and you are just interested to follow the direction rather than reaching out to the destiny. Destiny, if it comes, that's great. And that's what I think a lot of the people who are watching this can take out of this, journey that you just explained about yourself. For that, you don't need to really have everything mapped out in college itself,
Mhm.
but just being honest about what draws you can really guide you through this journey. And if you're doing really well, very honestly and passionately, then I think it'll lead you to all the great places that you can, just like you. Now let's talk a bit about, a lot of students that they wish for, but rarely go after. An international internship while still in your undergrad. You landed one at Stilt Studio, Bali, right?
Yeah.
How did you discover this opportunity and what made your application stand out?
So it's a very interesting story, I would say. COVID had just happened.
Mhm.
Everyone was in a lockdown, right? And we were at home. College was online. I already had this, thought in my head that, the education and industry has a very big gap. So I wanted to work. And at the same time, I was helping Anurag on his thesis. Like that's how the culture of SPA is. You help seniors, you get to know what is there and all of that stuff. So yeah, he had experience working in Bali for Alexis Donio. And then I found out there's another firm called Stilt Studios, and they were doing very interesting, modular steel, timber, joinery tree houses, something right, from a concept to reality. I was very intrigued by this opportunity. And I was talking to Anurag, and I'm like, how should I, I want to learn Revit and I want to learn all these softwares, but I want to work as well. At that conversation, I think it concluded to, just work to learn.
Hmm.
So, and meanwhile, I was also doing a lot of these competitions, right? So it was locked down. We had a couple of hours on our hand, with college and everything. So I participated in at least 8 to 9 competitions, along with my friends. So that's also one thing, which really gave a boost to my folio, despite being in second year.
Mhm.
Because, when you participate in competitions, it's a little flexible in terms of design. You improve your production, you improve the essence of the design, make it more concise, make it more, you know, nice and everything. So yeah, by the time I applied, it was in middle of my second year, I think, when I applied to Stilt Studio, and I think that's what stood out because I was 1 or 2 years into education, but I was proficient in a lot of softwares, and I had really good amount of work because of competitions. So I think
Mhm.
that's something that really helped me back this opportunity. Otherwise, it wasn't common for a second year student getting an internship opportunity at an international office. And also, COVID helped because it was an online remote thing, and in the starting, so that was also really beneficial.
Hmm. Interesting. It's interesting to know that how you've defined that, a lot of effort has gone into, even in the initial years, to, secure an international internship, which usually people aim for after, let's say, the fourth year in academics, when
Hmm.
it's a part of the curriculum to find an internship. But having those early access requires you to push more than every other peer, and that puts you into a out of your comfort zone. Applying for many competitions or learning new
Yeah.
tools requires you to put in more efforts than a regular academics would otherwise demand you from. So do you remember a moment in those few weeks or time, when you said a month or something, or 2 months that you spent on upskilling or learning, where you were out of your comfort zone, that really shaped your perspective on architecture and what it demands to excel at what you're doing?
Okay. So I think there's two parts to this question as I understand. One is what was so I'll answer the first part, which is moments when I realized it's taking more than what I imagined to be, and what was the extra effort. So all this while before my fourth year internship for 2 years, I was working with Stilt Studios and Alexis alongside attending college. And COVID, after COVID, there was a year when I was attending physical college and working with them online. And then I went to Bali for 4 or 5 months as well. So it was during the holidays before COVID. So a lot of managing between, like job and college. And now that I think of it, I don't remember how exactly I was able to manage to do that. But I remember these, flashes of moments when, I'm working in a railway station, like looking for a charger. And because, there's a lot of travel and all of that involved. So it was really interesting, I would say. It was a learning experience and really pushed me, than my own limits. And second thing, I would, it's about how architecture in my head was influenced because, I was always a creative, but it was because I was academically, dealing with design problems. So never put really much thought into the design, in the details of the design, right? So when you actually shift to a industry-based experience, you realize, there's a lot of details, which there's a lot of work which goes into the details, right? So that's something, which gave me perspective that, to make something happen in reality, a concept is just stage one. You have like other stages to actually bring it onto the ground. So yeah, that gave me a lot of perspective very early on. It was even before my third year. So yeah.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah, I think that really sums it up because, sometimes, the best growth doesn't come from, let's say, the biggest opportunities, although it can add to like the internship that you just mentioned. But even before that, it requires a lot of rigor and effort in the process of which you will learn a lot. And that is the kind of real exposure which is hard to replicate, which leads you to those opportunities which are really visible out there. But the
Hmm.
back end effort and the journey in itself of solitude, learning, growth, that is all that sums up the best of learning and growth that does the impact.
Yeah. I mean, that is so true because sometimes you just push yourself forward. When you have these opportunities. I remember I just knew Revit very basics of Revit when I was applying to Still Studios, and I knew there's if I get in, there's like a month in between. So while filling the application, I'm like I knew basics of Revit, and I have a month because I know this firm operates on Revit completely. So I made sure in a month of time, I was so well versed with Revit that before even starting the job, I knew how to make custom parameter models and all of that stuff, like automation, a little bit in Dynamo. So just exploring what is all out there to be equipped to, start with the bang.
Hmm. It's quite
So yeah.
interesting. Yeah, you talked about big and other internships that you did, and now let's move to the bigger one, bigger milestone of your
Mm,
journey, which is
yeah.
getting into big through internship, which is the academic fourth year internship. I think it's one of the most competitive firms globally, big Bjarke Ingels Group, and you started there as an intern before even being hired full time. How did you approach the big application? And what did you focus on in your portfolio and email or the approach? Where did it all start and how did you go about it?
Hmm. So, I'll start with the funny bit. So the thing is, before even I was starting my portfolio and applying and all of that. There's a phase before your internship in college that you go through 2 3 months of making a portfolio, applying to different firms around the world. I didn't know what big was,
Okay.
and I had no idea. And I remember, there was a list which was getting circulated, and I saw the firm, I saw their work. I went on to the website, but the application process was really tedious. It was like a 15-minute website. You fill in all the info and all of that stuff. Whereas the other method was, you attach a cover letter, you attach your portfolio on email, and then you send it. Like you send it like rigorously, which to firms which align with your vision and all of that stuff. So I was just being lazy and I didn't apply. And I wanted to do an internship abroad. I was sure. And also the fact, like I'm missing out on this, but why would Big hire me, right? Like for
Hmm.
me to sit in India and think, like why will a firm like Big will hire me? It was self doubt, but also being practical because that's how big of an opportunity this was to me, right? So yeah, and I was applying to other firms, and there was nothing, being concrete because of visas and all of that issues. And and then when I finally applied to Big, I got a call back in 3 4 days for an interview. Still not keeping up my hopes, you know. I'm like, it's just an interview. A lot of people go through that. So yeah, always staying, humble, probably more humble than I should. Uh, we cut that part out. I mean, but yeah, I'm just saying, I was being humble and staying grounded all this while. And so the idea was so bizarre of getting into Big that I never even conceived. I was not even into the belief of it as 10% of a
Mhm.
probability, right? And I remember when I got the call that I've got the email that you've been accepted as an intern. I didn't know what to do. I was shocked. And the first thing that I remember in my memory was going up to Google Maps and looking up where New York was. Is it on the West Coast or is it on the East Coast? Because I had no idea, right?
Yeah.
So that's how wild this opportunity was. And there were no precedents before this. Like I was the first person from India to go there and work in the New York office, right? Because they usually hire interns from universities in US, universities in Europe. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's one thing. And for the portfolio, in hindsight, I can think about things which made me stand out, right? But at the time when I was working on my folio, I remember that one thing that was very unique to my folio was that every design was pushing the boundaries of the design problem itself. Like the approach was that there is no box. Like people say, there's thinking out of the box. The approach was there is no box, and
Hmm.
every design has its own unique characteristics. And then when it comes to presenting the design, I never went on Pinterest and look for diagrams which could relate to my design and then produce those. I
Hmm.
think that's a common practice in our industry, but I think diagrams should, and all the representations should originate from the design itself. So it has to be unique to the design. It has to respect the design, and then when you look at it together in a folio, right, you can see it's something different.
Hmm.
Otherwise, everybody knows Pinterest. Everybody has been to Pinterest and all of these referencing software. So even if the HR is having a look at your portfolio, they might just run it up because the diagram is so similar to something they've already seen.
Hmm.
So I think that's something that stood out. Being true to your own design values and something that is unique.
Hmm.
And I think that another thing that really helped me was, I would say, having even before starting my first internship, like mandatory academic internship, I had 1.5 years of experience. So that's
Hmm.
something which really pushed me to the level of that they were willing to hire a person from India, you know, for the first time. I think that's what made it the the anomaly, I
Quite
would say.
interesting. Yeah. As you said that even before you had the opportunity to apply to Big as a formal application as an academic fourth year internship, you already had something under your belt which summed up you being standing out. And
Yeah.
Folio just added in terms of how do you approach design and what your design vision or your language to approach design problems is. And as you had said that being authentic is really necessary, and rather than just picking up softwares and tools just to do something for you, use them to define what you actually mean to say, because folios is what you speak to those who don't want to hear your voice but your vision.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting.
So like for internship, I think the vision of the studio should at least align with your own vision, I would say. Like in
Mm,
hindsight, and in even when I was applying, when I got to know about what big is, I mean, I could see some sort of similarities, right? Like big also stands true to the design, conveys diagrams very crisp, simple, easy enough for everyone to understand, but very complicated when you go into the details. So I could see there was, an alignment in the term in vision, and all the firms that even I applied to, I was looking for something that is happening, which is very new to the field,
mm,
something which is breaking barriers across. That's what was intriguing me. I didn't want to go to a firm doing, BIM, or I didn't want to go to a firm doing computational design. That's how, a lot of people, at least that's what I heard, a lot of people try to narrow it like that. And
mm,
I know, that's a smart way of, narrowing it on the basis of scale. But my approach was narrowing it on the basis of, the design vision, which I think, that gives you a lot of possibility to narrow the skill later when you're actually
mm,
working in the firm, right? Because
interesting.
every office has all sorts of teams. So once you align your vision, and that's when you find a niche for yourself. So I think that is something that I think is something a person should do. I think, and we should stop, like narrowing it down on the basis of softwares. I think.
Good. That's a good approach. I think with that, I would also pose another question, which is
Hmm.
from your experience, what does big really value in candidate, especially for those who are applying for its entry level job or internship, just the way you have carved your journey through it? What is it that they look for?
Um. So what I would say is that big really values, like your creative thinking, and they really value people who are creators at heart. Even now in the
Mm,
office, I was working in the New York office, I was working in the London office. More than an architectural firm, it's a firm, where creatives work together. It's honestly such a nice workplace when we work. We're sketching something. It's very team driven solutions. Meetings and all of that. There is very little hierarchy. There is no hierarchy in the office, right? So I think big really values people who are creators at heart. Designers, not architects, as I would say. And then also one more thing. Big. I think any kind of firm would value this, which is taking initiative. I think a lot of people, treat it as work. I mean, if you're in a creative field, it's not a 9 to 6 job, right? It's taking initiatives, working on something that adds value to the firm, giving it back to them. So I remember this incident. It was in the New York office. I had just joined, and we were working on a competition project. We got this, I'll try to be very, I'll navigate through the NDAs, but
mhm,
so we got this huge GIS data set from the clients, right? And it's a huge, 100-kilometer site with all the survey points, and we have to extract the points, make it on Rhino, the topography, and nobody knew GIS, and it
mm,
was a deadline. It was a deadline coming up in 2 3 days. So I remember just going up straight to my desk. I knew I learned softwares through YouTube and online articles. I went there till lunchtime for 4 hours. I browsed through every video of on GIS, on QGIS, ArcGIS, which would equip me enough to produce the topography.
mm,
I mentioned it to my team, and by lunchtime, I could, present them the topography in Rhino with all the surface points and all the coordinates. So that's something, I didn't do it to impress people. I knew it was imperative to do it, and nobody in
mm,
the team knew GIS at that point. So just stepping up your game. I mean,
mm,
and one wonderful thing that happened was I started learning GIS. The push that you needed, probably you're not motivated enough, but when in crisis, I think, that's the best time when you can, learn quickly.
mm. Interesting. So, as you said that, it's not just about the tools, but what defines you as a designer and also what it takes you to deliver and add some values is at the end sums up whether it requires you to upskill yourself whether it requires to be really creative, whether it requires you to be really witted in terms of getting the job done, is all what sums up, I think, with every other practice that they want to hire someone. And that's what I think could be a takeaway from your answer towards this.
Yeah.
Great. Well, getting in to a big firm is, one thing, but earning your spot in a team like big takes something more than what you already have, probably, or you have to always push your boundaries. Let's talk about how you transition from an intern to a full-time role, and what were some of the small things you focused during your internship to build trust or stand out within the team so as to land up where you're currently at and be able to continue a journey at such a huge practice, very well reputed practice.
Um, So, when I was in the New York office, I remember, so the whole journey was not very straightforward. I was working in the New York office for 6 months. Then I had to go back to India, do my thesis, dissertation, and all of that stuff, and then I had to apply again. So
Hmm.
sometimes it's easier when you transition from directly to internship. That's what happens. I got to know when I got to New York that that's usually the case. You do your internship, and then it gradually converts into a full time opportunity, right? So, but I was on specific visa in US called J1, which is just for an internship. I had to go back and start all over again. So yeah, I mean, one thing that really stood out for me when I was in the New York office was creating value. So I remember we were working in the model workshop, and I mentioned it to my colleagues that I know a grasshopper. So in a month of time, I became like a local grasshopper guy, right? Everybody's, somebody is working on a concept design. They want to design a facade and they don't want to disturb the design technology team, right? So I
Hmm.
was just, going up to multiple people, helping them out, they're sorting out their scripts, working on it in my free time. And that was just something coming natural to me. It was not
Hmm.
like I wanted to impress or anything. It was just, being useful if I have. I think you treat it as an experience, it's just not work. If you are going into a global office, I'm inherently very curious, I would say. So just to see that kind of diversity, people from all across the world, and big is known for that. I mean, in the London office right now, we're 200 people with over 60 nationalities. So just to talk to people, just to understand where they're coming from, it really gives you perspective of of the world. And I think that's also something, that's something that adds to it, I would say,
Hmm.
learning from people. So
Hmm.
yeah, that was it. And I applied after after doing my thesis in India. I was again back to working on on my graduate folio, and I did apply to big, all the other offices, but it was really tricky, to be honest, because I had no precedence for this as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, everybody who gets a job at a global office has to do their masters abroad because it's a safe bet. You get your graduate working visa and all of that stuff. So I had no precedence at all that like directly you're getting hired into a big office. So even that's something I was really really skeptical about, but I did my best, and I think it just worked out in the end.
Great. That's a good advice that you just shared, and which leads me to another question, which is, if someone who is applying for internship or early career jobs, what advice would you give to someone who is about to start their internship, and especially if they hope it could turn into something more than just an internship, like in your case, to be able to continue your journey even after graduation as a full-time employee?
So you know if somebody is who's just starting in the field and who wants something more fruitful than a 6 month work experience, I would recommend them to actually understand the office, wherever they're working, understand what it requires, where are the niches, treat it as a task, more than work. Think about niches in the office itself where you can contribute. I mean, it's end of the day, it's all about creating value.
Mhm.
And you don't have to be like out there to show that. It's in very small steps, it's in very small things that just gets noticed by people. And you don't have to do anything. It's just just uh
recognizing that this is what the office lacks, and then molding it in a way which adds value to the company. I think that's what an employee is, and that's what a company is. That's how the symbiotic relationship of this works in especially in a creative office. So yeah, I remember this is one more thing that I just remembered, that when I just joined big, and for the first 2-3 weeks of experience in internship, they put you on the model shop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of concept designs happening, a lot of topography, terrains, base models for all these concept designs. So I was working on it, and I realized, what if we optimize the whole process of a topography to a laser cutting file of the whole thing, which gets tagged and everything in Grasshopper. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of manually, slicing it up, placing it on a grid and placing it on a paper, and then it's a tedious job if you have 15 models a day, right? So yeah, I took on this initiative, talked to the director of the model workshop, and we were working on a script. And by the end of my 2 or 3 week duration in the model workshop, we had the script up and running, which would label each piece, give the half cut line of the piece on the top. So it was a very nice experience for me. But yeah, that's how you identify a gap and contribute, I would say.
Mm. But I love that. I mean, it's not just about having all the answers because you're skilled enough, but it's also a layer added on top of it, which is about showing that you care, you're reliable, and also that you are hunger to learn and to add value. And that kind of energy is very hard to replicate just if you're just there for the job. And that's what I think a lot of people really resonate with and adds value to, which is great. And if I proceed further, your journey is more relatable and not driven by hype, but by clear choices. Let's reflect a bit for the students listening in. And in that case, the first question that I can think of is, what's one thing that you did during your fourth year or fifth year at SPA, whether it's before internship or before graduation, that helped you later, even if it didn't feel significant at that time, but landed you to be where you are currently at? What are the things that you did in your fourth year and fifth year differently?
So I remember, after the New York internship, so it was just, like I was getting into my fifth year. We had to choose a dissertation and thesis, and all of that stuff was happening, right? So there's one thing that I focused on was drawing conclusions for whatever experiences, learnings, not just work. Even apart from work, like I was in Bali for 6 months, then in New York for 6 months. So very different cultures, very different architecture styles, very different approaches to design. So I would say, a lot of people struggle to narrow down their thesis or dissertation topic. So I think it should be born out of your, I think experiences in life, which should reflect in your design thinking. So I think that's how I was able to narrow it down to, I was doing something on modular bamboo architecture in India. That was my premise in my thesis.
Hmm.
And then in the end, I ended up making a bamboo center, which basically in India bamboo is readily available, but I think the skill set, and we're not optimizing the potential of bamboo in India right now. So yeah, that was the premise of my thesis, but it was born out of this. I think Bjarke also talks about this, which is called hedonistic sustainability, which is a space, two very contradicting ideas can very work well in unison, and at the same time, like for example, a space which can be playful and like very user friendly, but at the same time it can be sustainable. So I remember seeing a lot of bamboo architecture back in Bali, works of Ibuku, works of Elora Hardy, works of Pablo Luna. In the West, I was, exploring modularity with Big in the internship. So it just struck to me, what if you combine, modularity and bamboo? And I understand bamboo as a material is not replicative, right? Each member is a different size and everything. So there are ways to work around it, the joineries and everything. So it was a nice experience, which was born out of my, life experiences, all these experiences. All
That's
right.
great. That's great to know how you shape it up. And if in case someone is listening right now and to seek answers and wondering where to begin if they want to work in a global firm, what would your advice be for them?
I would say, like really, it's very simple. Start small. You know, it's 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 not that you can plan your 5 years. You cannot plan your 5 years in life, right? So start small, take it step by step, baby steps. With clear intentions. As you progress, leave out the options that you think are not working for you and try to focus in a niche. And as I already said, like good habits, basically being consistent about learning things, because all of
Hmm.
this, dopamine, instant dopamine we have in the world right now, even being consistent with the learnings, with practicing softwares, or with just being dedicating an hour each day is enough. You're already ahead of 99% people in the race, right?
Hmm.
So yeah. Also, one more thing I would say is that, a lot of people take it for granted when they enter a college. I think that's the kind of mentality we have in India, that the college is responsible for to get us jobs. The college is responsible. We put it a lot on the college. I mean, the basic is that a college just gives you a platform, right? For
Hmm.
example, SPA. I mean, I don't know. I'm really not sure how is it doing right now. But when I was in my first year and we had, you seniors and everything, the the most fruitful aspect of SPA was the atmosphere it provided, right? You meet a lot motivated people, and it's your effort that counts. You cannot just
Hmm.
simply blame it on the institution and wait for something to happen, right? Like, you're along with 500 people, they're doing the same thing. So what's making you different? Why
Right.
wouldn't it happen to them? And you know, like going into a global firm and all of that, is very broad. It's like a 5-10 year plan, you know but I would say actually focus on creating designs and participating in competitions, actually honing your skills, which gives you that edge over other people.
Hmm. Interesting. That's quite, I think, relatable to many of those that even if you don't have clarity over how would you land up into a global practice or would you be able to do the best out of it, but then the only thing that can be really clear at the moment would be, are you able to do the best? Are you able to put in the right effort? Are you in a space where you can thrive and be consciously aware of what you're doing and what you want at the moment? And as it progresses, as you said, that your first internship, you never had the clarity or the idea that you would land up in big, but the fact that you were interested to do some work which is in certain direction, it helped you get into an internship at Bali, which together summed up with your curiosity and learning and upskilling, all the efforts that has gone in the background to be at a position where when the opportunity arose, you were standing out from the rest to be able to grab that opportunity when it came to your door. And
Yeah.
honestly, that is the kind of advice I wish more people heard in schools and colleges, that your careers isn't a race, and you don't need to follow someone else's script to be somewhere. But what you can do is just to focus on doing good work and push your boundaries to learn, to thrive into something that adds more value, and have fun in the journey rather than the just destination to be aiming for. That's quite interesting, and I'm really happy to know your perspective of your journey and to be able to consider this as a discussion that would add real value to people who are seeking some advice and understanding of what it takes. And it's not a magic pill that you just take and it gives you the answer or shapes your journey. But I think it should really give some idea to people who are seeking what it takes to be where you are at currently, and how should they span out.
So thank you, Kavul. You really summed it well. Whatever we've discussed during the whole conversation, and there are a lot of realizations even I'm having right now to understand, how it goes. And I think, yeah, yes, like in the end, it's all about very staying true to your vision, and like making the small steps.
Aryaman, thank you so much for sharing your journey. Not just what you have done, but how you thought through it is quite important and really insightful for people who are watching us right now. Your story is a proof that you don't need shortcuts, you just need to stay intentional keep learning, and trust the long game, where your journey is derived out of your interests and curiosity and all the efforts that you put in to enjoy the process rather than the destination. To everyone listening, your architecture career starts with the mindset, not the job titles. Keep building, keep exploring, and always stay curious.